Welcome to Dolby Creator Talks. This is a show about how creatives use technology to tell their stories, and I'm your host, Ben Givarz. In this episode, we're exploring the Grammy-Winning 2025 album by Justin Gray, Immersed, and talking with the creative team behind the record, bassist, producer, and engineer Justin Gray, co-producer Drew Jurecka, and mastering engineer Michael Romanowski. Immersed is a groundbreaking record featuring 38 artists from around the world, where every sound on the album was performed, recorded, and produced with specific immersive intent. The result is an experience in which the Dolby Atmos mix isn't a translation of the music, it actually is the music. Conceived over 5 years and recorded across studios and sacred spaces in Toronto, Immersed is truly a cinematic journey and a reimagining of what an album can be. Featuring 38 artists from around the world, the project places the listener at the center of a 360-degree orchestra, combining original composition, immersive audio production, and visual storytelling to reimagine how music can be experienced. In this conversation, we hear how Justin installed a full Dolby Atmos system in the studio during tracking, so musicians could hear themselves in Dolby Atmos as they played. He shares how they reamped bass lines through speakers in the resonant halls of the Aga Khan Museum, capturing the soul of a space as if it were another instrument itself, and how with every decision, from microphone placement to the recording, to production and mixing, through to the final mastering stages, there was one goal: to place the listener at the center of the music. This conversation was part of Dolby's Music Community Session series and also features Dolby's Greg Stryke Chin. And shortly after the recording of this conversation, the record was awarded a Grammy for Best Immersive Audio Album in 2026. So congrats to the team behind the record for that award, including co-producer Morten Lindberg. Here's exploring the Grammy-winning album Immersed in Dolby Atmos with Justin Gray, Drew Jurecka, Michael Romanowski, and Greg Stryke Chin. Thank you guys for doing this with us, and a huge congratulations to you all.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Wow. So awesome. Winning Best Immersive Audio Album for Immersed, it's no doubt like a milestone for you personally, guys, but also for immersive music and for Dolby Atmos as a creative technology. So it's really exciting for us, for Greg and I, to be able to celebrate this and have you here to share the journey with our community. We do have viewers from all over the world, which is great. So if I could ask you to just introduce yourselves and share a few words about your roles in the music industry and of course on this record, and then we'll get into the record. Justin, let's start with you.
Justin Gray. On this record, I start as a composer. I do have a couple co-composers on the project as well. Then one of the recording engineers, editor, co-producer with Drew and Morten Lindberg, who's not with us today, and then the mixer in the format, both for the home cinema version, which is our main version, and then also a part of the cinema remix. So hand in all of the pots at once, except, of course, leaving the mastering to my good friend Michael here. And yeah, just honored to get to be on this journey with such an amazing team. I'm here in Toronto, so I'm actually at Humber Polytechnic, where I'm a professor of audio production, and I work out of my own studio as well, just mixing and mastering and producing records.
Yeah, I'm Drew Jurecka. I live in Toronto as well, like Justin, and we know each other in person, having played together. I'm a violinist, probably foremost still, but these days I work in production in a variety of different ways. I work as an orchestrator, I work as an arranger, I work in record production, producing records, and occasionally mixing. And as is the case these days, I'm heavily involved in engineering. So I've taken it upon myself over the last couple of decades to learn as much as I can about recording engineering in order to be better informed when I'm producing and also be able to engineer my own projects. And as far as this record was concerned, I was Justin's co-producer, which basically meant answering any questions Justin might have, helping him plan things from the very beginning, sort of conceive of this very adventurous adventure into immersive audio, and think about mic techniques, think about mostly arranging. I was more of a music guy, so I was involved in critiquing and helping to sculpt arrangements. After the fact, a lot of editing And then Justin used me as sort of a final approval stage for his mixes as well. So I got to weigh in on the way that the record sounded. And I think I was there to sort of keep Justin thinking about music as well as tech, because it was such a crazy enterprise in both of those two spheres. So I was the keeper of the artistic flame when Justin was in tech world.
Nice. I can't wait to get into some more of that. Thank you for sharing that. The aforementioned Michael.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Michael, and I had the honor to master this record, to be a part of this, both the stereo and the Atmos version of. I've also had the distinct pleasure of watching Justin grow into inquisitive, to function, to idea, to creation, to implementation, to release, to Grammy. Like watching this journey of this record go from inception to, hey, I got an idea, to, hey, check this out, to, hey, here this is, has just been inspiring and awesome to watch, and really heartfelt to be a part of. So.
And of course, shout out to Morten Lindberg, the other co-producer on this as well. It's interesting you mentioned that, Michael, because I've seen a lot of this journey as well over the past couple of years. Justin, I mean, I'm sure it's been a whirlwind couple of weeks in the past few weeks for you since the win, doing your award tour, if you will. But like going back, I mean, you've described this as kind of a 5-year labor of love, right? Like one rooted in personal and artistic and technological exploration. And I've been following this journey of yours for, I think, at least 3 years, right? Like we've done events together over the course of those years as the journey's unfolded. But how does, being recognized with a Grammy kind of resonate with that journey? And
yeah, elated, so much joy. Obviously, just very proud of the entire community that is a part of making it, including, especially Drew and Michael. And we would have liked to have Morten on stage with us too. But, as Michael was saying, these are, and Drew, we're friends of a very, very, very long time. We've developed our relationship far outside of this project, and to have that culminate in that moment is hard to describe. I think I'm still digesting it from that perspective. But the big thing is, the Recording Academy. This is our peers. These are folks who are our friends, our colleagues, musicians, producers, music professionals, and it really is a stamp of them, I think, recognizing the craft, recognizing the journey, of course, being moved by the music. And I think it is just a wonderful, an acknowledgement of that, the project and what it represents, as you said, I think, for immersive audio as a whole. But I also got to give a shout out. I mean, we had dinner as all of the nominees the night before. Andres and Martin and Hans Martin Buff. And then we had a chance to finally meet Andrew Law as well. I mean, the whole year, the whole collection of records that was being recognized, I think it really represented just a forward step in immersive audio in terms of all of these are new projects. Hans's has also got a lot of composition at the source. All of it is really pushing the format creatively, which is what's supposed to happen. Every year we're supposed to, build upon the tradition that is immersive audio, and so the whole experience is just a wonderful joy. I think, honestly, afterwards, the aftermath, minus some of the intensity and, the feelings, it's actually been kind of relaxing because I'm no longer in kind of an album promotion mode. Because when you're the artist, that's the job, right? That's the gig is of course there's all the art, but it needs, I'm kind of the shepherd of having to get it out to the world. I have enjoyed just having a little bit extra time. A couple nights of real sleep has been appreciated as well. But yeah, just reflecting on all of it, feeling very, very grateful and touched by the recognition of our peers.
One of the things I think is really cool, Justin touched on, is, and there's a whole lot there in the community aspect of this, which is, we all, many of folks, we all got together for dinner beforehand. We all hang out. We all talk to each other. Folks, we try to learn from each other. Grow and see what folks are doing and what works and what doesn't work and how are things going and pain points, and help out and really just kind of help lift all boats. And I think one of the things that we've seen over time as we've gotten to this is that this year's awards was fantastic in that this was 5 brand new records created this year. So the creation aspect was for Atmos. right? And then all of these records, each of them also came from 5 different countries. So seeing that the creativity is grabbing hold, like we're getting past the phase from an existential standpoint, we're getting past the phase of back catalog, which we're still doing, but we're getting past the things that we've known, and we're now getting into the world that we don't know. And there's where the creativity starts to kick in. And that's what I think is one of the most fascinating, cool things about this. The progress of this and this award particularly, and being associated with this record, and again these awards, is that this is, I think, a good turning point to show that where we're going with creativity, and we're moving past what we've known into what we don't know, and there's where we get into cool stuff. Really looking forward to that.
Drew, as a co-producer, you were involved in the early stages, and we'll get into that too. But like, how does it feel for you to see this kind of shared vision recognized at like such a global level?
I mean, it's quite amazing. I have to say, this entire project has been incredibly exciting for me. Immersive isn't the world that I mostly live in, because I'm mostly in the production world, but the prospect of exploring this as an art form, as Romo said, like the idea that we're actually approaching this from the ground up in the way that it's written, in the way that it's arranged, in the way that it's recorded, and then seeing that through was incredibly rewarding. I mean, Justin's got a great way of thinking through these things, and I think that it was a wonderful challenge to be able to learn about this and then push him in certain ways. I was usually the proponent for maybe more psychedelia at moments, in addition to just the amazing discrete source pinpointing that this technology makes possible at its best. I mean, it was really fun to kind of walk those creative lines and see how we could make something that felt cohesive and felt organic, but also sort of pushed boundaries in different creative ways. It's been wonderful.
Love it. So Justin, take us back a little bit into the origins of the record, like from a personal and a creative standpoint. How did you like conceive of what it was that you wanted to do and how you would compose these songs? Was it like always that you wanted immersive elements to be part of the composition rather than just the mix from like the inception of this?
Yes. That said, I think that the initial spark, like sometimes that's what we need, is we just need something to, tip the cart off the hill to start rolling. And the initial spark for me was, I've been working in this format for a long time. At the point that this started, I've done what I refer to as spatial remixing so many different projects and different styles for folks, which is kind of, it's an imaginary role, right? The idea when we're remixing someone's song, we need to bring that spatial creativity to something that's already been created. And it's beautiful and it can turn out so well. And through doing that for so long, which at that point is like a number of years and quite a large catalog of songs, that already fundamentally changed my relationship with music. To the degree that by the time I started writing, I can imagine it behind me. I can imagine it beside me or above me, and the feeling that changes when that happens. And I think that's what drew me to become a producer and a mixer in the immersive world in the first place, is just the fact that space is a really, really powerful storytelling tool and a powerful production tool. And so when I sat down to write the music, I definitely set out with this thing. I want to make a project where I write the music from the start, produce it for immersive audio. Very quickly, though, after that started, I get all the speakers ready, I get sample libraries ready, all my instruments out. And very quickly, you're reminded that a melody is a melody, a groove is a groove, a harmony is harmony, form is form, momentum in music, like that space is just one of the components. And so I do think like very early on, I started like kind of putting things everywhere. And it's like, before that starts, I need a story that I want to tell. And so a lot of the initial musical ideas are like a bass and a looping pedal, finding a melody I like, getting the piano out, figuring out the harmony. And then as soon as that was there, that's where the spatial part was there at all times. And I found it to be it was engaging. It's a thing that just kind of I've been looking for a long time. I think it's almost like a feeling in the imagination that I've wanted to express music this way. And the process of going through it continued to amaze me as it was happening. as well as just, I think almost in a certain way, just make more sense. As I was creating this music, I felt as though the space was doing the thing that I've always wanted it to do, which was allow for the opportunity for conversations between parts, allow for that feeling to be there. And so, yeah, it's almost like it was the first idea, then it needed to be set aside for a second so that I could just make sure that the actual character of the story was kind of sound and, justified being told. And then from then on, it's a part of every single decision.
And, you collaborated with Drew early on. Like, at what point were you guys thinking together about kind of arrangements and playing and an immersive production, like starting to write this way?
I'll go first, then I'd love to hear Drew's. I mean, I did, for instance, I had all of the music largely composed in terms of its initial, here's the composition, here's the arrangement, here's the orchestration. And then I think I come to Drew and say, hey, I'd like to record this soon. Let's talk. Let me externalize this music to you and just get your broad opinion, which, like Drew said, I mean, maybe, you take it from here, is at first it really is a musical discussion, and then the technological kind of follows to make sure that it's serving it. But I'll pass it off to Drew.
Yeah, though the interesting thing, I think maybe this is an interesting thing about you as a arranger and composer, but also it was one of the interesting things about this project is that Justin captured a lot of audio. I mean, and including, I would say, over capturing arrangements, right? Like we captured the same things in the horns, in the strings, sometimes in guitars, and then made a lot of decisions afterwards, which also allowed us to use the space. I mean, I think essentially you were hedging because it was so adventurous, and because we had placed everybody in this space that we were trying to maintain. It allowed us later to make these decisions, both about arrangement, but then in a listening setup, also decide where we wanted to hear things, how we wanted them to interact, and kind of engage with the immersive space as we were making editing and mixing and arranging decisions after the fact. The other thing that surprised me about this process was, I mean, there are so many elements in this record. There are so many musicians, and there are so many things happening all at once. And by contrast with the stereo mix, where we had to resort to tricks to essentially keep everything audible and keep everything working, the amazing thing about this technology is that it allows you to hear all of these things concurrently, and it allows your brain to process it differently, right? You hear them around you and you kind of mix it as you're listening. You actually experience it like you're in a live performance. And so each time you listen, you can turn your attention to different parts of the arrangement, which I think in a stereo context, you basically are tricking the listener into doing that in the way that you imagine. But this, I guess what I'm saying is that I was also surprised by how much we were able to keep of the massive amount that you were recording. Because one of the things I was saying to Justin early on is, why are we recording so many things? We're going to have to delete some of that. And that was true, but it was actually not quite as true as I expected.
And each with 12 or more microphones.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, multiply that times the number of microphones and the sound sources and re-miking of things later, like going back into the theater. And
well, how many mics were in the array, Justin?
Tremendous amount.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different arrays, but the most mics in an immersive array for an ambient source, would be a 15-channel array. Although I never limited it just to that, in the sense that sometimes I would add additional distance mics to have, the perspective of having a giant hall, and then of course the close mics are always present. So the most mics on an instrument is 38, and that was drums. Which sounds like a lot until you realize, we do have 16 speakers. And each of those mics has a purpose in the space. But maybe, we'll probably get into the mics. We'll ease into that conversation through Ben's questions, probably.
You recorded a lot of it at Gordon Ragg Studios, right? And where you also installed like a full Atmos monitoring system during tracking, right? So let's talk about how you did approach the miking and the capturing, and then like maybe how that affected the performances of the players.
Yeah, absolutely. So the real benefit not the real benefit, the next benefit after, I think, spatial composition just allows space to make sense musically. Like, for instance, balancing timbre, just like we do in orchestra. If you're orchestrating for a big orchestra, I mean, you've got to think about how the violins on your front left are going to blend with the brass in the back, or with the timpanis, or with the basses on the right. I mean, space is a part of orchestration in orchestral music, big band writing. So that at the source solves so many things in terms of the logic of the arrangement. But then the capture part, I mean, it's one thing to do it for a live concert. The capture part is like, I've kind of thought about it. It's like where it's only imaginary until you can capture it, and even more importantly, have actual people play it. It's fun to imagine all sorts of things, but to have people who can actually sit down and do that at a masterful level is a requirement. So fortunately, the community here, all the people, we've got them. They're here. I can call upon these folks. They're friends, they're colleagues. Drew knows them. I know them. I wrote the music for them too. So I was like, there's no surprises. It's like, I know this person can do this. So it's not like a guitar part. It's a guitar part written for Ted Quinlan. It's a sarangi part written for Pankaj Mishra. It's a tabla part written for Ed Hanley. So once that's done, though, the advantage to having the composition spatially organized in advance is that we can make things spatially with confidence. So there's really, at this stage, one of the ways to envision immersive recording is what Morton has done and demonstrated to the world with such mastery, which is placing an array in the middle of the ensemble, place the ensemble around the array, let's say a large orchestra, and have them perform physically in the space all at once and capture that image. And Morton and I have talked about it. It creates a hyper-realistic experience for the listeners in the middle. And Morton's recordings changed my life when I heard them. I think obviously the world has recognized that as well. Like that concept of presenting the ensemble that way is just like a light bulb, just, turning on and then blowing up for me. And so in this record, though, the difference is that not everyone's going to be in the room at the same time. And that is for one primary reason, I don't want to create realism. I'd like to create surrealism. And by that, I mean, I'd like the opening of the first song to be like there's 15 kalimbas right by your head. But by the time we're in the middle of it, that there's a full orchestral brass section and string section, but the drum kit still sounds super tight like a fusion record. And there's an electric bass, but there's also a bass synth in the back. I mean, mixing all of these things is more like what we do in pop music, which is we mix multiple perspectives to make surreal environments. And so because of that rule, I couldn't deal with having, let's say, the bleed of the string section in the snare mic, because I demanded to have the ability to manipulate each of the sources to create this very specific spatial perspective. So that poses a solution or poses a challenge, but also like a unique opportunity. And the unique opportunity was, well, if I know where all the instruments are in advance, I know if the brass is behind me, I know the strings are kind of to my side in front, I know what the kalimba is going to do, I know what the bass is going to do, the drums, all of that, is that we can mic them with spatial intent and directionality at the source. So an example, the one that I think maybe makes it most obvious, is the brass quartet, which is on a number of songs. There's a trombone in your right surround, there's a trumpet in the right rear, left rear, and there's a trombone again in your left speaker. So 4 instrumentalists to 4 speakers. They have their close mics. And so I can place a mic directly in the speaker or use an object and put it in between, whichever suits the mix. But then the answer is record the ambience in front of the listener and have them play behind an immersive array so that all of the other speakers are filled with the ambience, but that the timing information of them playing from the back to the front is all maintained at the source. And that's the magic. That timing information is what we love about orchestral classical music recordings, is hearing that subtle thing that happens when something on this side of the stage also touches our ear a little later or touches the microphone later. And in immersive recording, I took that concept and applied it to every single layer. So if the udu is supposed to be above us, it's mic'd as such. If the drum set is in front of me, but I want the room there's a giant array in the room. And yes, that leads to massive amounts of microphones. But what it means is at the mix stage, I don't have to pan anything. Everything's already placed exactly where it's intended. And yes, I have a ton of mics and a ton of channels, but with a couple nice VCA groups, I can bring up the close source so I can get the intimacy and the detail. And then I can bring up the ambient source, and that already has all of the space and the timing information that localizes that instrument and creates a sense of envelopment all at once. And so does it create some tracks that have 1,000 tracks in it? Yes. I think that's normal, but I recognize that that's a problem with me. But it also solves the problem that I've had so many times as a spatial remixer of putting something behind me, being like, ooh, I love that, but it feels disconnected. But I wish I could go to the source and just have some ambience to fill it in. And we use plugins and all sorts of stuff to create it, and it can come out so well. But I gotta say, doing it at the source, as much work as it was, it solves that problem, and it creates, even though it is a surreal environment, all of the timing and spatial information is real. And our brain loves that.
Well, you're doing, if I may, like what Morton, has, by the time he's done with the recording, it's down to, balance and edit. Like the arrangements are done, the recording is done, the space, the placement, same kind of thing, which I think is awesome, Justin, is the distance and timing subconsciously give us information about realism. Does this feel right? Is this, is something manufactured here? And, I think that that's something to learn from moving forward. Anybody who's getting into this is adding extra mics when they're recording in space. We have a tendency to want to stick something straight up against a source and then say, okay, let's make it in the mix. Let's put some reverb on it and move it back. But there are timing issues and all sorts of stuff. And Justin, what you did, I thought fantastically well, was you timed the distance of the space to the opposite side of the source. So everything felt natural. The brain doesn't try to analyze it or doesn't have to work to put the pieces back together again. Cause, we do that in so many ways that we're given little bits, enough information that we work on it and we have to figure it out, and it becomes stressful, and, we move on to whatever. But when that works and clicks, there's a sit and there's a listen. And then now you're past the process and you're into the music because it feels natural. There's not that disconnect. Sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's subconscious, but you did a fantastic job with that, making that real.
I was going to say, one of the exciting things about this is because of the way it was captured, it also left us the freedom, which you don't have if you just do a pure everybody in one room arranging capture. We still had the freedom of modern record production after the fact, which was incredibly exciting. So we had this incredible space capture and this realism and this sort of pre-mix that essentially happened by just placing everybody in the room. So it was being mixed as it was being recorded in that way, but it still allowed us the freedom later on to make decisions and then also selectively add other elements that were not captured that way as, little additional sprinkles to break that illusion creatively, which is also very exciting.
Yeah. And I've got to give credit as well. Like, I'm there, I'm placing the microphones, I'm intimately a part of all of it, but I also, my assistant recording engineer, Alex Gamble, who's also, connected with Ben and Greg before. Alex is with me every day, as well as Ryan McNabb, who is kind of the studio manager here at Humber and was in their days that Alex couldn't be there, but also helping with setup because, of course, this many microphones, time is one of the things that keeps us from doing things. And hey, that's a reality of record production. I mean, in this case, I did know that, and I created a block booking. Like I had a colleague here who was like, "Did you block book the studio for 6 weeks?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Are you making a Steely Dan record? Like, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Maybe. I mean, if I could do it, like, I'll shoot for the stars. I'll shoot for the stars." But I was like, "Yeah, it's going to take time. Like, that's a reality, and of course, that comes with consequences. It comes with financial consequences. It comes with things that can't be present on every recording. But for me, unless this was possible, I kind of wasn't interested in doing it."
Yeah. The motto of this record was no half measures. Yeah. We said that a couple of times.
We don't.
Like, should we do this? No half measures.
Yeah. Well, to say that time is the most precious thing. You're absolutely right. And what happens, unfortunately, I think we see that people are on time budgets more so than that's the thing that is the most precious in the process. And having the time to explore and stop and try something and then try move a mic and try something else yields much more than the sort of the survival instinct of we have to capture this and we can fix it in the mix. Because there's a lot of evolution that comes in that thought process. In the, it's the thing that happens in the old school of what happens between the end of the tape and when you've done a take and you've got to rewind, and it takes you a moment to process because you've got to rewind. Same thing with taking a little bit of time and getting some space, feeling that, fantastic. Yeah.
Well, one for you, Michael. Thinking about all of the effort and all of the kind of micro decisions, if you want to call it that kind of went into kind of preparing this from a mastering level. Did you find that how you approached it, because of all the differences of how this was approached from a recording and mixing level, were there differences that you considered when it got to you in terms of mastering?
As far as differences go, if you're thinking about well, okay, so from a 10,000 foot view, my job is to look at it as a body of work, not a collection of songs. And it comes in, we get records as a collection of songs that have been focused on and focused on. Justin, as a, fantastic mastering engineer himself, understands the concept of, what's going on there. I will say it's also an honor to be able to let him be the artist and engineer, and the fact that he allowed me to do that role and look at it from that standpoint meant I could approach each one separately and look at the sort of the overall how do the pieces then put together. We did do the Atmos version first, and he can tell you the story about doing it, but we did do the Atmos version before doing the stereo, because he mixed the Atmos first without it being stereo. A lot of times, Greg, in the mastering stage, if I'm getting both stereo and mastering, I'll do the stereo first because it's something that is easier for people to listen to and get a handle on what they're hearing, what their perspective is. This is too loud, too bright, too quiet, too whatever happens. Whatever it is that they're used to listening to in car and headphones is a lot easier to go that way with most folks. With Justin, he knew exactly what he wanted, where he and Drew and Morton they were very clear with their path. And, there were subtle adjustments between each song, but that's also the point. That's why I believe mastering is such an important process in this. I've been from day one or pre-day one, banging the gong about how important I think it is. There's so many places where things could go wrong with deliverable, or things that could go wrong with things that you're so wrapped up as an engineer into, in this case, 128 separate pieces of audio per song. You've used every asset you can. My job is to make sure everything stays there and is exactly the way it's supposed to be with every setting. And that is a totally different perspective of each song on its own. And then now how does it go, like you said, as a body of work? And so, I think it gives freedom to the engineer to focus on the song, because they know that they can come to me in the background, or Justin or anybody, who's doing this, and say, great, you've paid attention to what it is that makes that song unique. That's why you do that song. Now, my job is to take that and look at it from the bigger picture and work with the vision to try to sculpt that. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but I think that's
absolutely. That's a great, it totally answers it. Yeah. Thank you. And then for Justin and Drew, Justin, you've been working in Dolby Atmos in the format and spatial and immersive formats for I would say pretty much since day one, quote unquote. Approaching this project, you're working with a lot of really talented, amazing, musicians. And, Drew, yourself included there for sure. Many of them have never had much experience working in or even experiencing music in an immersive format or in Dolby Atmos. What was that like in terms of being in the room and getting things set up? And then I'm sure some of the musicians are like, "What is happening here?" And then the thing actually happens, the recording and the ingest actually happens. And then can you any interesting stories to share there?
I'd say it was the greatest, not surprise in the sense that I anticipated it, but you can't know until you do it what it's going to happen. And it just makes so much sense. Musicians, especially at the level and the caliber of musicians who are involved, are reactive individuals, right? We're trained to listen and react. There's some of the best listeners on the planet because it's literally our job. And so as soon as they had the ability to come into the control room and listen to what was being created, it happens instantaneously how it affects their creativity. And this is no different than when we come into the control room with a stereo system, right? Band comes in, takes a listen. It usually, like the notes, good musicians are taking their own notes. They don't need the producer to even say it to them. They're already like, yeah, I know. Just let me go do my thing. In this case, for them to be able to experience like what the intent was, Alex and I and Ryan, we're listening to it the whole time. We're listening in Immersive at all times, making all our microphone decisions accordingly, making arrangement decisions accordingly. But the creative part, the source, I'll give an example that I find to be a poignant one from the process. The duff player, the udu, the duff is the frame drum. It's on the kind of halfway point of the third song, Repose. That song is very much featuring my friend Nagme Faramand, incredible Iranian percussionist. Nagme and I go way back. We've played Iranian music together, flamenco music together, but we don't talk about technology too much. We talk about music, we talk about food, talk about life. She comes in, obviously, like there's a lot of technology going on, and maybe I'll describe that relationship afterwards. But I had the idea that I'd like the duff part to be in the left speaker and the right speaker. I was like, I think it'd be cool if there's 2 takes and the listener is like flanked by duff. So we record it. She's there, killed it, sounded amazing. She came into the room. Again, the musicians are definitely looking around, be like, well, that's a lot of speakers. And you press play. She sat down and just listened and was like, okay, cool. So I'd like to go back on the floor. Just put me back out there. I was like, okay. I assumed maybe it was that she wanted to replace her parts. She heard a mistake or something. And she's like, okay, great. Mute the old ones. I want you to do a take, and I want to be in that speaker in front of you to the left. We do a take. She's like, great. Another one. I want to be in that speaker in front of you to the right. Do a take. Great. I want to be in that speaker behind you to the left. Do a take. And she's changing instruments in between, changing the way she plays, all the things. My jaw is just on the floor watching it happen because it's way better than what I had imagined. Not only because of positioning, but because she was changing what she played to build an arrangement. And then, of course, the last one being the quad. Let's do one in the back right. Plays them all. I'm listening just like elated. Just like, oh, damn, that sounds good. She came in, listened. She's like, yeah, I mean, if I had 4 of me, like this is what I'd want. And it's just like, mic drop, walk out of the room type of experience. And even Alex, I think we're just like, and that happened so many times. Subha Shankaran, the vocalist who's on that same song, but also on the song Pendulum, being able to play for her why we were doing 14 overdubs and showing her like, as you change the timbre in space, it makes the experience bigger. At a certain point, they're listening in headphones in the studio because I just want them to be comfortable. I don't want the technology to bother them. It's not, they're listening in stereo. They need to just hear themselves well. That's how musicians wanted to record. They don't need, there's a potentially room for binaural in the future, but at this stage, it's just like, I just want everyone to be comfortable to play the way they want to play. But when they can come in, have that quick check-in, understand the spatial aspect of what they're creating, they go back on the floor, and we don't need to lecture anyone on technology anymore. We're just talking about music. All we're doing is talking about the reality of, oh yeah, I noticed that when the part's behind me, it might be nice if I was whispering a bit. Oh yeah, I noticed like when the part's above me, I need to be, like it'd be cool if I was a little bit higher in pitch. All these things just happen naturally. Or if I'm having the idea, I can literally demonstrate it to them. And it just expands, it's like a snowball, like the whole record just kept going like that. And it's amazing. And I know for all of us, Ben, Greg, the whole team at Dolby, like this is something that we know in our imagination has got to be true for so many musicians. And this project was a demonstration that like it's a proof of concept to me where it's like all you need to do is just facilitate that relationship with space, and then it's just going to fly. There is one other aspect though, and that is when you have this much technology, which is also 5 cameras, also 38 microphones, also 16 speakers in the control room. I think my job as a producer during the sessions was to have that technology disappear as fast as possible. I want them to come in. I want to get their coffee order. I want to make sure that they feel comfortable. They walk in, they have that moment of like, whoa, man, I know you were doing something here, but like, are you serious? Like, does this really need to be all this? And the key is just like talk about the music, just be in the music. And as soon as a musician sits down with their instrument, the world around them disappears. And I just wanted to create that environment for them. And then once they come back in and they hear it, then all of a sudden they're like, ooh, nice, this technology is working. So at first I think it can be a bit daunting, but then as soon as it's demonstrated its musical merits, I found immediately everybody was like, they just got it.
It's easy as a session player to take recording for granted, right? We've all done a million sessions. And I do think that these sessions were an opportunity for people to experience something completely new, in many cases for the first time when they were listening back. And it is inspiring, right? It's a whole different way of hearing yourself back. It's a whole different way of conceiving of the recording process. And it was eye-opening for me, and I got to see it be eye-opening for a lot of people.
I just think it's fascinating, your story. Every time you tell that, Justin, that they, you didn't have to explain the technology. They had the creativity in them. They don't need to know how it works. They just need to know that it does, and they need to trust that it recreates what it is that they're trying to do, and if you get past all of that, they go be them, which is awesome, because then they go, I'm going to do this and let's try that. And then you go, it's allowing them to be and getting, I love that you're getting the technology out of the way. Because in the end, you want creative people to focus left brain, right brain. We've talked about this all the time. If you have to go back and forth, the pendulum doesn't swing very far either direction. So if you can keep them in the creative side, not have to just do stuff, they go back and like, okay, cool. You stay technical, let them be creative, and pendulum stays where it needs to get results like this.
But ideally it's an offering, right? Like this is the benefit of something like this, is that it's not just making it disappear. It's, in Nagme's case, it's a great example. It's also that she understood the offering, right? This is a new thing that we have not ever experienced before. And there were so many points, again, for me as a producer who hadn't really worked in this field and was learning about it from Justin, getting to experience these things and say, let's try this. What if this? What if that? I mean, that's not so much a left brain, right brain thing as it is just an expansion of the possibilities when you walk into a recording studio, which is, I think, was exciting for every musician on this project.
Let's talk a bit about the mix then, and get into some specifics on what you did in terms of like your use of objects and how you approached placement and movement. There's so many things going on. Can you kind of take us into some of your specific creative choices?
One of the unique parts about this project is that when I get to the mix stage, everything is all, as I mentioned, has already essentially taken its physical space in the arrangement. In that, even in the studio, we were mixing into multi-channel beds, which were involving, all of the discrete channel microphones. And for me, this composition was actually written very explicitly, or at least arranged, even when I'm collaborating with others, for 9.1.6. And what that means to me is there's 9 points, 9 kind of pillars on the main layer. The LFE is, of course, there, and then there's 6 pillars on the ceiling. And so, although I don't actually approach most of my pop music work this way, this is a completely discrete channel mix. So what I did was, we could think of it as an object bed, or I like to call them object groups, but as an object bed type of layout, in the sense that everything is being mixed into objects that are in the discrete locations, LCR, left wide, right wide, the wide surrounds in terms of the 9s and the rears, and then our 6 tops and the LFE in the bed, of course. So if it wasn't for the film mix or the binaural settings, which the binaural render modes, which of course they exist, so they made very explicit decision-making for me, I could have mixed this, for all intents and purposes, into a discrete channel 9.1.6 object group style mix. And actually, when you look at the renderer, it looks that way. It looks as though that there are just objects in all of those locations, the 15 locations, 9 plus 6, and then an LFE in the bed. Now, that's because when we record everything spatially at the source, that kind of what a phantom image does for us sometimes in object placements is it expands a spatial kind of position. But I didn't need to do that here because I have all of that information. So when you do record, let's say an 11 channel microphone array, 7+4, the brain fills in all the gaps because it's all there. That's basically enough pixelation in the image to be able to fill the entire kind of envelopment space. When we're working in spatial remixing from mono or stereo tracks, oftentimes I got to put something in the cracks to kind of just, unlock the brain to be able to kind of have it take up more space, where that wasn't necessary here. So from a position standpoint, the composition was around 916, the microphone placements were all around 916, and the position decisions when I left the studio were already basically positioned accordingly. So the challenges that I was aware of before I started, though, was the binaural render modes are very important. And I was quite confident that, and did some initial testing, that certain instruments might want some near settings. Certain instruments might want some off settings. Certain ones might want mid. I did not use any far on this particular album. So what that means is like I couldn't just use one object bed and set, the front channels to a certain binaural render mode. So what I did was I made different 906 or 904 groups for different instruments, which is essentially creating what we could think of as a 9.1.6 stem out for film. When people are mixing for 5.1 in film, they'll put the harmony in one stem, they'll put the percussion in one stem, they'll put the melody in one stem, they'll put the orchestra in one stem, and sound effects maybe in another as an example. It's the same concept, except when you understand what the ADM can do, the objects, of course, are going to become discrete mono channels on the back end. Full resolution, it's basically an ADM is a 128 channel wave file with the positional metadata. So I've got a 904 group for drums. And the reason I say 4 is I knew I didn't need center top information for drums. So I saved. It's object budgeting. They do this in film all the time. So 904 for drums, 904 for strings, 904 for brass, 906 for soloists, because I did want to kind of get in the cracks up in the top ceiling stuff for soloists. 906 for percussion, because there's a bunch of tracks, for instance, that have like percussion layers that are specifically for those speakers. 904 for harmony, that'd be like piano, Rhodes, guitars, things like that. Then I did have an effects. I did use the bed. I used the bed plus 8 additional objects to create a 906 for like reverbs and effects and things along those lines. Then separate stereo objects for tabla, 3 separate objects for bass. That's because there's electric bass, but then there's also a down an octave duplication through analog synths for every bass note on the record. So 3 objects for bass, 2 objects for vocals, because there's 2 vocalists at the end that I wanted to have separate. I think I covered it all, but it does mean that when I deliver it to Michael, it's all the objects, but it's not more placement. Like it's not that I'm using 128 places in space. I'm using it as a delivery mechanism. So now this means I can set the binaural render modes according to instrument. For instance, drums, LCR is off. Bass is off. Vocals are near, I think, for those particular ones. Tabla is mid. I think most of the other stuff honestly stayed as mid. And then there's the cinema remix. And what this ADM does is that when I line up all these tracks as one big giant session, when I go to the dub stage, I've got the ability to re-level and replace certain instruments. So now on the dub stage, I can readjust bass levels. I can readjust the drums, or I can bring up the brass, or I can basically do a stem mix, but in a 916 capacity. And that was everything at the dub stage, because once we get there and we expand into a large space, you want to adjust level. Sometimes you want to adjust timbre. The LFE channel wants to come up. The subtleties of percussion maybe want to be, compressed a little bit more, because in a really large space, the really, really quiet stuff doesn't necessarily translate. And the last was, just the idea of space. Like 916 doesn't make sense in a movie theater. There is no wide. There's your LCR, there's a wall, and there's a wall. And if you mix into the array, and then the ceilings, and then the ceilings. If you mix into the bed, you access the arrays, and those are our groups of speakers. They cause all sorts of phase problems, all sorts of comb filtering that was not favorable to this production. I know it's awesome when you mix into it, but with this production, it was like it collapsed. The discrete nature of the production was important to me. So now all of a sudden we could take the percussion object that used to be in the back speaker and move it forward. And now I'm like so it ultimately kind of turned out to be essentially like a 40 object location mix for cinema, where it was only 15 in home entertainment, all from the same master file. So that's a lot of pre-thinking. I recognize that as a composer, it might be rare to be able to kind of think to the dub stage at that very moment. But without doing that, I would have handcuffed myself at some point in the production. And so that's the architecture of it.
Justin, you also created this as a visual album, right? And separately from that, documented much of your recording and production process. Share a bit about like that part of the journey, like the documentation side, but then also the visual album presentation.
Yeah, so the visual album, it's co-directed, and it's all, the cinematography is all by our dear friend Michael Fisher, who's here in the Toronto. And actually, when I think about it, both people I told this project to early on are both named Michael. One is Romo and one is Michael Fisher. I told Michael about this so early. I said, you know what? When this record I want this record to be experienced in a movie theater. That's like, ultimately, like, that is the grand kind of giant version, which we actually all got to experience together in LA and San Francisco. And there are things that we sacrifice when we go into a large space, but there's also the communal part that we gain. But in my mind, I was like, I imagine being able to sit down in the Dolby Theater at the Vine, or the beautiful theater in San Francisco, which is my newest favorite room on the planet. And, just be able to sit. And the visual aspect of it was Michael and I saying, what's the story we want to tell? And the story is literal. The story is that musicians killing it on their instruments can be very beautiful. It can be extremely engaging and inspiring, but we got to capture it like cinema. So multiple camera angles on every person, but everything's real. Everything has to be captured at the source because there's improvisation involved in all of the parts. So Michael is just there. He's there the whole time, 40 days probably of filming, 200 plus terabytes of content. At some points in some songs, because there's 5 camera angles on some of the players and there's 38 artists, at some points in some songs, there's like 80 angles to choose from. It's absurd. But like Drew said with the audio, we kind of over-captured, we seriously over-captured. So that in the moment we can choose, because you don't know. When you're filming it, it's like you don't quite know what's going to be the shot. And, I could say to him, no, don't record the strings for this. But then on another song, I need them. So we just shot everything. And then he did a beautiful job editing together this story, which is the story is ultimately, watching the musicians do their thing, but with a sense of beautiful lighting and cinematic cameras and the whole like, and then a little bit of extra musical elements to just tie the whole cinema experience together, like the pendulum art from the record, the 3 dance performances, and even a butterfly conservatory, which once we sat back and just watched the whole thing, we're like, we need a little bit of abstraction. We need to leave that studio for a few minutes so that when we come back, we're excited to be in that space again.
Many thanks to my guests, Justin Gray, Drew Jurecka, Michael Romanowski, and Greg Stryke Chin for sharing the story behind this great record. You can learn more about Justin, check out his music performance videos and making of the album videos at justingraysound.com. You can hear the Grammy-winning album Immersed in Dolby Atmos on enabled streaming music services such as Apple Music and Amazon Music. It's available as a pure audio Blu-ray at ionrecords.com and also available for purchase at immersiveaudioalbum.com. For more conversations with creatives using Dolby Atmos and Dolby Vision, check out our Dolby Creator Talks podcast on all the major podcast platforms, including the video version on YouTube. The links are in our show notes, or you can simply search for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're curious to know more about Dolby Creator Lab, go to dolbycreatorlab.com to find information about all of our programming. There you can subscribe to our mailing list and access the entire library of episodes of this podcast. That's where you'll also find the Dolby Atmos Music Accelerator and Dolby Atmos Learning courses covering all the topics you need to get started creating and mixing in Dolby Atmos. The courses are always free and available in multiple languages. For other great resources for creatives, check out the link in our show notes. Until next time, this is Ben Givarz with Dolby Creator Lab at Dolby Laboratories. You can follow me on Instagram at creatorlab.ben. Our producer and engineer is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. Our production coordinator is Karen Kahn.